We are now live. Sound check. Audit, Finance, and Administration Committee meeting for Thursday, August 11th, 2022. Sound check.
We are now live.
Okay, thanks everyone. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Audit and Finance. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Members of the public are advised that our meetings are webcast live by the City of Hamilton and temporarily archived on the city's website. Any presentations and reports considered at this meeting are available on the city's website, and that members of the public can contact the city clerk's office to acquire documents in an alternate form. As well, a reminder that all electronic devices are to be switched to non-audible function during committee meetings. Members are reminded of the 5-minute time limit, which will be adhered to during this meeting, and members can submit another request to speak if they require more time to ask questions or make comments. I note that quorum is present. Thank you, Madam Clerk, and there are no ceremonial activities. So, turning to Madam Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda today?
Yes, Madam Chair. As the grant subcommittee meeting was not able to achieve quorum on Monday, August 9th, we have the following addendum items. 2 added consent items, 7.4 grant subcommittee clerk's report 22-003 from August 9th, 2022. Item 7.5, 2022 City Enrichment Fund funding follow-up, GRA 22002A citywide. 2 added discussion items, 10.6 City Enrichment Fund Equity, Diversity, Inclusion EDI Recommendation Report, GRA 21003B citywide. 10.7 City Enrichment Fund Digital Program, CM 22015, GRA 2203 citywide, and 1 added notice of motion. 12.1 2022 Hamilton Santa Claus Parade. Also note that the presentation for item 8.1 has been uploaded.
Okay, thank you for that. May I have a mover and a second to approve the agenda as amended? Moved by Councillor Ferguson, seconded by Councillor Vanderbeek. Electronic vote, please. I assume Councillor Powers was a thumbs up.
Yes, we did see that here, and that was carried 6-0.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone declaring a conflict or declaration of interest today? Seeing none, may I please have an approval of the minutes of the previous meeting of July 7th, 2022, moved by Councillor Wilson, second by Councillor Powers. Electronic vote, please. Unless there's any discussion on it. Oops. There we go.
Sorry, Chair, I was not here on that date, so I don't know.
Oh, thanks. My apologies. Then no, you can't. Are you? Did I put you as mover or seconder? Mover.
As the
okay,
mover,
so,
sorry.
Can we just reverse it, Councillor Powers, Councillor Wilson? Then is that okay?
Yeah, it's good on my end. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
I'll have to just open the vote again. My apologies.
No, don't apologize. Thank you.
And that vote carries 6-0.
Thank you. We have no communications today and no delegation requests, so we're going to move right on to item 7, consent items. We have numerous items of 7.1, various advisory committee minutes. It's all listed A to K. May I have a mover or a seconder to receive the consent items? Moved by Councillor Ferguson, second by Councillor Vanderbeek. Any questions or concerns? None. We'll go to a vote.
Just Councillor Vanderbeek. Excellent, and that vote carries 6-0.
Thank you. 7.2 is ward-specific funding initiatives update as of December 3rd, 2021. May I have a mover and a seconder to receive the consent item 7.2. Moved by Councillor Powers, second by Councillor Vanderbeek. And is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, we'll go to a vote, please.
I believe Councillor Wilson has a question.
Sorry, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Could someone advise if there's a ward budget that's a negative in terms of its balance, that's fine, because if it's area rating, it will be refilled, if you will, for the next year. If someone could just advise on that, please.
Brian in attendance. McMullen?
To the chair, yes, he'll be
Okay.
right with you.
Thank you.
So through the chair, Mike Zagarek, General Manager, Finance Corporate Services. We will review the ward area rating reserves. Under policy, they should not have a negative balance at the end of a council term, as this council cannot bind future councils as it relates to area rating reserves. So again, it is my understanding that the reserves all have a positive balance, but we will review that.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for the question. And no further questions then. Electronic vote, please. It was moved and seconded.
And that vote carries 6-0.
Thank you. 7.3, 2021 Annual Report on on Commodity Price Hedging, FCS 22062 citywide. Again, Brian McMullen on this report. May I have a mover and a seconder to receive the consent item? Moved by Councillor Vanderbeek, second by Councillor Wilson. Any questions, concerns on this? If not, Councillor Ferguson. Go ahead, Councillor Ferguson. Can't hear you. Can't hear you.
So through the chair, maybe Councillor Ferguson, try unplugging your mic and plugging it back in. We see you're not muted on our end, so.
I'll go without the headset. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just a quick question to Kirk or Tom Chessman. Do we anticipate to have a big negative variance on fuel supply at the end of this year? It looks like electricity will be okay and natural gas will be okay, but I'm wondering about fuel, diesel fuel in particular.
Yeah, so through the chair, Brian McMullen, Director of Financial Planning, Administration and Policy, Corporate Services Department. We have Tom Chessman attending virtually, so if Tom can answer that question, that'd be great.
Morning, Tom.
Hi, Tom Chessman, Manager, Energy Initiatives. I've only got up until April data from the fuel side for this particular year. This report represents looking back at the previous year. So I'd love to give you a more accurate statement in terms of what a variance might be. I'm not sure if anyone else from Transit's available to really give you that accurate answer. Sorry, Councillor.
No, April's not far enough along to be able to pick up a trend. I know
Yeah.
that everybody's complaining about the cost of fuel, and I don't know, I can't recall what we carried per liter for diesel in our budget, but I'm just curious now because we seem to be tasting, based on Mike's presentation at GIC earlier in the week, we're facing some pretty big negative variance on things. And I'm curious now how fuel is shaping up.
If I could just add one more comment through the chair, we certainly are continuing to benefit from the lower cost CNG buses as compared to diesel. And you can see that although it's reflected for 2021 in the report, you can see that there's a significant benefit by running those CNG buses as opposed to the diesel. I'll just add that comment.
Great point. Thanks, Tom. That's all, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. So the report was moved and seconded.
So my apologies to the chair. Mike Zagarek would like to speak to the item.
Mike, go ahead.
So through the chair, just further to Tom's comments, Councillor Ferguson's question, we did budget $1.15 for both natural gas and diesel for 2022 in anticipation of some escalation tied to COVID recovery, but not expecting some of the geopolitical issues that are driving fuel prices. Through our variance report, we did identify we will have a negative variance in fuel, both in transit and as well as central fleet. So there will absolutely be a negative variance, and that negative variance will be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars for 2022.
Are we currently paying in the order of $2 a liter now when we had $1.15 budgeted, Mike?
Through the chair, I'm not sure if Tom knows what the current rate is. We budgeted $1.15, and staff right now are anticipating $1.50 for 2023. I'm not sure what the current rate that the city is securing is.
And one way benchmark is to look at the sign on the gas stations, and they're still up around the $2 mark, and they went quite a bit higher than that a month ago or 2 months ago. And okay, if Tom doesn't know, we'll find out when we get to year end, but of course I won't be around. Well, there you are, Tom. Are we paying $2 now?
Again, I'm looking at the Tom Chesson, Manager Energy Initiatives, through the chair. Just looking at the up to the April data, we're at $1.40 on average. So, and again, we don't pay that full price, although it's looking at the station at the corner is a good relative number. We do pay a different rate in our corporate purchasing of fuel, so we don't quite reach the highs of highs from the retail that you see on the retail signs.
Okay,
but
thanks, Tom.
$1.40 up until April was that. So I don't think we're going for the full ride on what you might see on the street sign.
We're still 50%, 40% higher than what we carried the budget, though. Okay, thank you.
And things are moving down, I would say, in the short term. Yep.
Except tomorrow, they're going up 8 cents again.
Wow. Okay. All right, everyone. Recording your vote, please. Moved and seconded. All right. Sorry, Madam Clerk, I'll wait for you.
That's okay. So that vote carries 6-0.
Thank you. Item 7.4 is Grant Subcommittee Clerk's Report 22-003, August 8, 2022. Can I have a mover and a second to put this on the floor? Moved by Councillor Ferguson, second by Councillor Powers. Any discussion? Seeing none, recorded vote, please.
And that vote carries 6-0.
Thank you. Item 7.5 is the 2022 City Enrichment Fund funding follow-up, GRAs 22002A citywide. We have Morgan Stahl and Mimi John. May I please have a mover and a second to put this on the floor? Councillor Vanderbeek, Councillor Wilson, any questions or comments on this item? Seeing none, again, recorded vote.
And that vote carries 6-0.
Thank you. We're going to move into reports presentations now. We have item 8 is staff presentation, Rhodes Value for Money Audit, Rhodes Quality Assurance Supplementary Audit Report, AUD 21006A citywide. Charles Brown, City Auditor, is here to present the Rhodes Value for Money Audit Report. Welcome, Charles.
Thank you. So good morning, Chair, and through you, I'm Charles Brown, City Auditor. I'm here to present on our Rhodes Quality Assurance Supplementary Audit Report. Next slide. If you recall, we last year, I think it was July last year, we issued our audit of the Rhodes program. That was a very comprehensive audit. Covered a lot of topics. One of the major topics in that audit was, if you recall, quality assurance. As it so happened, subsequent to the tabling and presentation of the audit, we received confidentially reported concerns about 2 additional issues that were not dealt with in that original audit. Next slide. So out of, after we assessed those concerns that were brought to us, we call it a preliminary assessment of the concerns that were brought forward, we decided to conduct a limited scope supplementary audit to the Rhodes audit. So in this audit, you will see there are 2 topics that have been explored with additional work. We wanted to examine specifically the veracity of processes for comprehensive weight validation of construction materials. Some contracts are paid based on tonnages. And secondly, the process is to test and validate if specifically asphalt friction coarse aggregates, which is a premium aggregate, whether we have processes that ensure the aggregates we receive on those projects align with contract specifications. Next. So this was not a reopening of our old issues from the previous audit, nor is it part of the separately launched audit that we began some months ago that relate to roads quality assurance in new development neighborhoods in Growth Division. That's ongoing right now, so that's another area that you will see in the future. Next. We used external subject matter experts to help us with the technical aspects of reviewing these two issues in this audit. We chose 3 projects from our for our review, and the selection of these projects was based on the relevancy to the issues of weight-based monitoring and friction coarse aggregates. So they were chosen for that reason. Next. A little bit of background. Construction contracts can have different payment mechanisms. They can be, we're probably most used to lump sum, but they can be by linear meter, per unit of work, and also based on the weight of materials. So for the weighted materials-based contracts, basically that refers to the materials that are trucked in, but also for reconstruction projects where there's excavation, it refers to materials trucked out. If the material has to be excavated and trucked out, it is significantly more expensive if the materials are deemed contaminated. Basically, there's no cost to disposal costs related to clean materials, but contaminated materials can cost, I think, up to $60 a ton. When contracts are based on weight, there should be adequate processes for verification of those weights. Otherwise, there's the potential to be overcharged on contracts, which is obviously a value for money issue. We reviewed 2 projects for this particular topic of weights. They were chosen because they had significant overruns in weighed materials. One is the Red Hill Valley Parkway 2019 resurfacing, in which there was 7,400 tons of overrun, and Ferguson Avenue North, in which there were 8,800 tons of overrun. The 3 objectives in looking at these particular projects: one, to see if we could, after the fact, validate the quantities that were charged. Secondly, to see if any red flags were there indicative of overcharging. And third, we wanted to obviously look at the veracity of processes. After review of these issues, we concluded, well, we were unable to establish if the quantities charged were reasonable, and there just wasn't enough of an audit trail, enough information for us to conclusively evaluate on that particular issue. We did see some red flags indicative of misstatement of weights, but really insufficient information to say whether or not that was fraudulent. We did conclude that the city does need to have clear and consistent processes in place, and we recommend some improvements to those processes, including those for administering change orders that are related to the overruns. Next. Specifically with respect to weight-based contracts that deal with contaminated materials, as in the Ferguson project, we also had additional observations around more in-depth testing and validation. Next. There were a couple of issues that came up in the course of looking at the Red Hill resurfacing project in 2019. This was one where there was an overrun of some 7,500 tons, that's gross for asphalt, which equates to about $868,000. And looking very closely at that, we were trying to determine if that was reasonable. At the end of the day, we were not able to come to a conclusion as to the reasonableness of that overrun in terms of being billed for it. There was another issue, one issue that we came across that was partially accounting for the overrun, was a requirement in that project for additional milling of 60 millimeters that took place because there was a stretch on the shoulder of the Red Hill that had no base coarse asphalt, which had to be dealt with in the midst of that project. Next. Oh, you got it. Thanks. This wasn't discovered earlier because the drawings the city had did not show that, so it had to be remediated on the job, so to speak. The other issue we encountered in reconciling the quantities was the fact that the city was given a credit for 500 tons of asphalt. And when we followed up on what that was for, it turns out that there had been a stretch of resurfacing that failed our quality assurance testing. And in lieu of ripping out the failed section or going through a formal penalty and evaluation process, which we have done on other occasions, the city and the contractor agreed to this credit of 500 tons that the contractor gave the city on the billing, which amounts to about $57,000 in dollars. So we found that process to be, it didn't follow the natural penalty process, and it was rather opaque. The second topic that we looked at, so that's the weight-based issue. So the second topic that we were encouraged to look at was the quality of aggregates that are used in certain roads, premium aggregates. How the city goes about testing the quality of friction coarse aggregates that are called for not on excuse me, not on all of the projects that we do, but on some, on specified. It's specified on some projects. Friction coarse aggregates are a premium form of aggregate that comes from designated sources and is typically used on high volume roads because it has superior properties and improves performance, including skid resistance. We looked at how the city validates that it is getting what, in this case, it's paying more for. We selected two projects where friction coarse aggregate was specified. One was Garth Street, and the other was the same project as before, Red Hill Valley Parkway resurfacing. For Garth Street, we used our external consultants, and they looked at the data and the photographs of samples that had been taken at the time, some years, I think 2017. The aggregate specified was Ontario trap rock from near Bruce Mines. They noted that there were many questionable, as you can see in the photograph, lighter colored aggregates, which did not look like Ontario trap rock. Now, here's a picture today of this particular road. You can see some issues of deterioration after, what is it, going into the 5th year. And already it's started to show some deterioration. And that's the issue. They also noted from the test results from the data that there were issues with the percent air voids and the percent asphalt cement. which would be indicative of RAP, or that stands for recycled asphalt pavement, being thrown into the mix. RAP was not supposed to be used, but by using it, you are substituting inferior materials. So we aren't, again, it's an issue if we're not getting what we paid for. And it affects the longevity of the mix. Its durability over time could be legitimately questioned. For friction coarse aggregates on the Red Hill Valley Parkway resurfacing project, our consultant looked at that as well. They found no issues with that. They found that the city had taken considerable measures to test the quality, including petrographic analysis to ensure that the aggregate was the quality specified. So that was fine. So just to wrap it up, our findings and recommendations relate to basically how processes can be improved in these two areas. There are a lot of detailed observations in the report that I didn't go into, but they will enable engineering services to build out its processes around these two areas. We also supplied them with the technical reports that we received from McIntosh Perry, our consultants, to assist them further. And we made 5 recommendations related to increasing inspection levels, adopting a risk-based approach to inspection, ensuring adequate resources, and improving documentation guidelines and procedures. So that's my presentation. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you for that, Charles. Questions now? I've got Councillor Wilson, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Auditor Brown. That was difficult information to receive. As you can appreciate, there is a lot of public commentary on the quality of our roads at this time. So to hear that A, we have a significant roads deficit, and then B, to hear that we may have been adding inadvertently to that deficit by not putting in the materials that we have paid for is hard to hear for residents, and myself included. But if I could work backwards, just because it is so important and topical, from paragraphs 110 to 113, you're saying that on the Red Hill Valley Parkway, on the resurfacing that commenced in 2019, given the diligence and the city, I think in your words you used, took considerable measures, you found no red flags in the process that was used and in the materials that were used. Can you just ensure that I heard you correctly, please?
Yeah, specifically on the issue of the quality of aggregates that were used, that called for friction coarse aggregates. They did take extraordinary measures to ensure that the aggregates, which are the stones basically that are part of the mix, were what was specified. And so our consultants were happy with the testing they did and concurred that the quality was as specified.
Thank you. In paragraph 100, I think it's your appendix, it says replacement of cheaper substances could negatively impact performance, including the friction properties of these roads, and therefore there is a risk exposure for the corporation. With respect to the road that you selected, being Garth, and the photos that were taken, it was clear that there was a production mix, which A, caused the city to overpay. It didn't get what it was paying for, and it raises questions about longevity. Does it raise questions about risk exposure? Through the chair.
Yes, thank you.
Through the chair, you mean specifically what type of risk exposure? It's the two types of risk exposure we're talking about here are the, as you said, it's the advanced deterioration that might take place because you didn't get what you paid for. We paid for premium aggregate. And secondly, how that might alter the properties of the road itself.
Yes, on the latter.
On the latter, well, we did not look into what that, it might be prudent to look at the friction characteristics of that road, but we didn't delve into that issue. That was something that I believe our consultant said it's not likely in that circumstance, but it's something that would be prudent to check. And I think that's in his technical reports that we've given to the program area, engineering services.
Thank you, Chair. So just so I understand further to that then, how does the corporation define high-volume roads?
I think that's a question for engineering services if you...
Okay, I can hold that
I don't know specifically the answer. I know they have their criteria and they have their measurements that they take, so...
Thank you. If I could jump back to paragraph 48. You reference an undisclosed conflict of interest that existed between the contractor performing the work and the city. That's also referenced further along in your report. I'm assuming that the city would have a process normally that would disclose such conflicts and therefore it wasn't followed. How does that work? Please, through you, Chair.
So through the chair, there is a process for disclosure of conflict of interest. In this case, it was not followed. We were undertaking, whilst doing this audit, we were undertaking an investigation of that very conflict of interest, which has concluded and will be reported in our next fraud and waste hotline report. But we considered it relevant to this issue because obviously having a conflict is one thing, but having a conflict in this particular circumstance of someone having a conflict and they're part of the decision making around that penalty issue for the non-performance. That's what made it relevant for this report, which is why we included it. I can't get into the detail because it's an investigation. We do have protocols around that, but I thought it nevertheless prudent to include it for your information so that you would be informed.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Chair. I heard the bell. I'll listen to my colleagues and determine whether to go back on with some of my subsequent notations. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Clark. Madam Clerk, can I just ask, are you ringing that bell at the 5 minute?
Yes, Matt is timing at 5 minutes,
Okay,
but
that's fine.
okay, thank you.
I was, but that's fine. I'll leave it to Matt. Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Clark.
Thank you.
And so, Madam Chair, I have a question of staff. While Mr. Brown is here, can I do that now, or?
Sure, in the interest of it being relevant to the report, yes.
So in these audits and value for money audits, there's usually a whole list of recommendations which comes with this audit and the one that came before that. I wanted to hear, if we can, from Public Works with regards to their response and how they're handling the recommendations, if that's permissible.
And who's here that can do that?
Mr. Can is here.
Got it. Thank you.
Through the chair, Carlisle Can, General Manager of Public Works. With me today is Acting Director Susan Jacobs. In addition, Chief Road Official Edward Soldo. He's on the line, a little bit under the weather, but nevertheless, he has joined us today. So thank you very much for that, Edward. With regards to the audit report, Public Works staff did meet with the city auditor and their team. We reviewed the report, the draft report, and the recommendations. We fully agree with the 5 recommendations within the report. We acknowledge there's an opportunity to improve, and apply the findings throughout not only engineering services, but also throughout the entire department. Public Works is committed to continuous improvement, utilizing these findings, and will continue to research and implement best practices in the forms of SOPs, business processes, and drive that down to staff and front level inspectors, program managers, senior project managers to ensure that this is consistent. We are also working on a work plan to ensure that these 5 recommendations are implemented, and there's a reporting back mechanism through my office and through the auditor when we report back to this committee. If you want to go a little bit further, we can, and we're happy to take any more detailed questions.
And so I'm also interested, Madam Chair, with the follow-up review. So Public Works is now going to implement changes. Those changes, I'm assuming, will be reported to the Public Works Committee, but will there be a follow-up review so that the Audit, Finance, and Administration Committee can see the changes in process so that we've captured all of the recommendations from the auditor?
Through the chair, I believe there is a formal process where we report back to this committee through the auditor, and we will do that, and we will make sure that these recommendations are implemented. Just want to expand a little bit on the budget implication as we move through this. Wherever we can, we will look for and drive out efficiencies and observe what we can. And through the formal budget process, if we change anything that then triggers a change on the operational side or the capital side, we will bring that forward through the regular budget process.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I want to thank Mr. Ken for his response. My last question would be to our auditor, Mr. Brown, with respect to the conflict of interest that is mentioned in this audit. So did I hear correctly that there's an ancillary review that is occurring as a result of that conflict of interest?
That's correct. There was an investigation that we did, and we came to a conclusion and issued that report. All of our investigations are confidential, but that was passed on to management. And those findings of that investigation, as you know, all of our investigations, we summarize the key ones in little abstracts that we present in our fraud and waste annual report. So it will be in that report as well.
Can I ask, Madam Chair, the city manager a question with regards to process now on a go-forward basis? How are we ensuring that our conflict of interest guidelines and policies are being adhered to by staff? We have a very thorough code of conduct and process for councillors. We don't get to hear staff saying, oh, I have a conflict of interest, I can't speak to that. So how are you ensuring that members of your staff are adhering to our conflict of interest guidelines for staff?
Through you, Chair. Thanks for the question. One of the things as a senior leadership team, we regularly ask Charles Brown, our auditor, to let us know about themes he is seeing across the audits, because that tells us where we have some systemic issues we need to work at. And one of those themes in meeting with Charles Brown and his teams was around staff not understanding the conflict of interest provisions in the code of conduct. So when we reviewed it as SLT, the provisions are there, but it's staff not knowing how to identify what a perceived conflict is. Who should they have a conversation with? Even though it's listed out in the process, we need to do a full education of staff to understand what's a perceived conflict of interest. what should they do? What should they put in place? There's actually a form that you fill out. And I've had to sign off on that with a few staff, but I find the form a bit confusing. And so Human Resources came to the senior leadership team with a plan of education and what we are going to do and how we're going to make it clear. Even through those conversations, I've started getting more forms into my office about this is a potential conflict. These are the things that we've put in place to ensure that employees' potential conflict doesn't become an issue. And where do those get filed? And so the plan, and I'll look to Laura Fontana, we're bringing that to the governance subcommittee so we can explain to council what the education program is and what improvements we're making to ensure the clarity across the entire corporation.
Thank you for that. And I draw some comfort from your words. I would like to at some point see the actual documents and how you're processing this through. As you know, it's been a keen interest of mine in terms of making sure that our staff are abiding by their code of conduct with regards to the conflict of interest, and it can certainly sneak up on any staff member who may not be fully informed. So I think it's prudent for you to do that training process and perhaps a report back to the new council in terms of where you are in that education process. Can I just get a quick comment from Ms. Fontana, Madam Chair? And that's the end of my questions. I'll relinquish the floor now, but if I can hear from Ms. Fontana, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Just further to the city manager's reference to the code of conduct training, we are bringing that matter to the governance subcommittee on September 9th. And then provided we receive the necessary approvals, we'll be proceeding with the in-depth training program across the organization.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. And we now have Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. Two things, Charles. First of all, I just wanted to point out to you from my experience, on slide 9 and slide 11, the picture of the cracking that's occurring on a new pavement. That, from looking at it, is reflective cracking. So it was probably a shave and pave project. And then the bottom, the base coat asphalt, which wasn't removed, was probably cracked, and it comes right up into the surface course. But I see our staff did the absolute right thing. They routed and sealed it to prevent water from going down in there and causing further deterioration of the road. So that's actually, I think, a good news story that we're doing the right thing. The other point I wanted to raise with you, do we have unweighted materials? And I'm thinking primarily of recycled asphalt, recycled concrete, or asphalt, and asphalt itself. Is there any weight in a contractor's yard where the asphalt plant is or the crushing facility set up to process the concrete back into an aggregate? It always puzzled me, and I used to raise it with the director of engineering, why we don't take trucks at random and put them through a third-party scale just to check it, to make sure that the scales are accurate, because scales are very easy to fiddle with. Do we have a process now where our inspector can take trucks at random, and whether it's once a day or once a week, and just take it and put it over a third-party scale and make sure the measurements are the same?
Through the chair, to your question, Councillor, no, we don't have a process as formal as that. I know they do from time to time visit the plant where the asphalt's being produced, but we specifically asked about processes for validation of weights for the actual trucks that are being hauled back and forth, and there's not a formal process for that we found.
You should take a look at that, because the large quarries, they're internationally owned, and they're not supplying and placing the material. They're just supplying it, and they have to get their scales certified regularly. But, it's awful easy, and I got to be careful what I say here, but if it's in a contractor yard, to run a small piece of equipment up the scales with the truck, and then back it off when the truck pulls away, the next one pull it back up again. And that's why you do it. I think the city needs to have, like other large buyers of construction services do, have a process where on a random basis, you just take a truck and put it over independent third-party scales. And I know our own yards have scales in them. You can do it there, or you can do a break arrangement with someone who has scales in their yard just to check that, because this is big money, and when you're paying for items by the ton. And so I would appreciate it if you would check into whether we should be putting in a process like that. And if you call me offline, I'll be happy to explain to you what I've experienced and how it's very easy to do that. Okay, and I don't know whether Charles has a comment on that, but that's all I have, Madam Chair.
Okay.
And,
Charles, any comment to that?
To your earlier point, just a response to your first point about the crack ceiling, that was a recommendation in last year's report because we just don't do it enough. So I was gratified to see in this case that we are doing it, because it's essential to do this early enough in the process before the cracks start getting really bad.
Absolutely. No, it's a good news story. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I now have Councillor Wilson, second time.
Thank you. Not that it's particularly material to this, but just I think it's important to clarify, just because I live down the road from Garth, my understanding is that that wasn't a resurfacing, it was a reconstruction. Can someone confirm that?
I believe you're correct, Councillor. Just let me look at that. Yes, it's a reconstruction.
So 5 years post a reconstruction, I don't really think that's a good news story. Charles, if I could, or perhaps it's more appropriate to GM Can, I'm not sure I understand in your comment to me, in my first series of questions, in relation to the friction, and the report uses the words risk exposure, and I think it was in reference to high volume roads, which I think are arterial roads. I'd like you to GM Can or to the auditor explain to me if there is a vulnerability here and if the process moving forward is going to include some sort of assessment of the friction capacity of those roads. Please and thank you.
Through the chair, General Manager Carlisle Can, responding to the councillor's question. High-level roads, they're defined as classified within the Transportation Master Plan as arterial roads. With regards to the question about risk and future risk, through the asset management approach and plan that we're going to do a network extensive assessment of all paved surfaces, and then we're going to prioritize based on risk, age, condition, observations that we do in terms of our capital planning process. So any risks that we identify, we're going to actively minimize and address from a prioritized perspective. The chief road official, Edward Soldo, he's working on a number of ISO-style elements that we hope to implement. And these are related to the design, construction, and operation and maintenance of the road network. So as we move forward, we will build some more rigor and robust practices as we move forward. But I think in terms of risk, definitely the high priority ones and the ones that we identified through our condition assessments and our observations, we will address, we will prioritize and we will address immediately.
Thank you. I appreciate that response. I thought it was important given that it was raised and given the issue of friction is very topical in the minds of Hamiltonians. Need that kind of assurance set out. Those are my questions. I just would like to close by thanking the auditor once again for his due diligence and how he conducts his work. I would like to I like to thank GM Can for giving us the assurance that things will improve moving forward. We saw that improvement with the 2019 resurfacing under the leadership of Chief Road Official Soldo. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. And with that, I just wanted to comment. I want to thank Charles as well. And with regards to the comment about Garth Street, I think when I had my meeting with Charles with regards to the Rhodes value for money audits, my concerns were also raised and pointed out with regards to urbanization, complete urbanization of roads in my ward that within years have started to crack and are still cracked. And the concerns. So that's exactly what happened at Garth has been happening in the neighborhoods that I've had resurfacing done. And I'm glad that going forward, we will do everything we can to mitigate those issues with regards to the materials, et cetera. So thank you for that. And Charles, thank you for the report. So with that, we have no further speakers. It was, can I have a mover and a second then to receive the report? And presentation moved by Councillor Vanderbeek, second by Councillor Powers.
And just waiting on Councillor Ferguson.
Councillor Ferguson? Councillor Ferguson, can you vote?
Oh, please.
Has he voted, Angela?
Not yet, no.
Councillor Ferguson
has. Yeah,
Thank
the
you.
vote carries 6-0.
Thank you. Going to move on now to item 10, discussion items.
Sorry, sorry to the chair, just on the recommendations of, we just voted on the presentation.
Oh, sorry, and to, on the recommendations then moved and seconded by Councillor Powers, second by Councillor Vanderbeek. Recorded vote, please.
And that vote carries 6-0.
Thank you for that. We're going to move on now to item 10.1 is 2022 external audit services. It's 1-year contract extension FCS 22068. Citywide, we have Mike Zagaric and Jackie Lee McInnes in attendance. Can I have a mover and a second to put the item on the floor? Moved by Councillor Wilson, second by Councillor Ferguson. Any questions on this item? Seeing none, we'll go to a recorded vote then, please.
Oh, and that vote carries 6-0.
Thank you. 10.2 is the treasurer's write-off of taxes under Section 354 of the Municipal Act 2001, roll number 2518003111027535, 0 Eden Rock Drive, Stony Creek, FCS 22069, and PED 22182, Ward 10. Staff, we have Shelley Hesmer, Ashraf, Hannah, and Maria DeSantos. Mover and a second to put it on the floor. Moved by Councillor Vanderbeek. I'll second it, please. And I don't know if there's any comments or concerns about this. It's pretty straightforward. Recorded vote then, please.
And that vote carries 6-0.
Thank you. 10.3, continued standardization and request to negotiate a contract for systems furniture for City of Hamilton PW 22065, FCS 22071, citywide, Ron D'Angelo, Mike Zagaric, a mover and a seconder to put this item on the floor. Moved by Councillor Wilson, second by Councillor Vanderbeek. And are there any questions or concerns on this report? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. If my recollection in reading this report, it's a sole source for, forgive me, but another, I think, 5-year contract. And I'm just trying to understand the rationale for why we're doing this. Thank you.
Yeah, staff.
And further to that, if I read the report correctly, we're going to enter a sole source contract and then we're going to seek to negotiate to secure better terms. I just look for some professional insight into once you've secured a contract,
So to the chair, I believe Tina Iacocca.
Yeah, Tia's, yeah, I see Tia. Good morning, Tia.
Good morning. Through the chair, Tina Iacocca, Manager of Procurement. The report before you is requesting permission to continue the standardization of Technion systems furniture and to request the ability for staff to negotiate a 5-year continuing contract with Technion to supply and do services for us and any kind of reconfiguring of furniture. We currently have a number of units and some very significant dollar values within our inventory that we currently reuse when there's any decommissioning or reconfiguration of furniture. We think that it's in the city's best interest to sit down with the vendor to try to negotiate a contract for another 5 years so that we can continue to utilize the inventory that we currently have. So a lot of the, we reuse a lot of the inventory currently. For instance, if a cubicle gets broken down and all the units or all the parts and pieces aren't being reused again, they're put into inventory in the event that they're needed again for a different type of cubicle. We're just looking for permission to negotiate with Technion at this point, and it's only on the systems furniture, not on the case goods itself. Staff are going to issue an RF procurement document towards the end of the year for the case goods because we feel that there are other vendors in the marketplace and we can competitively procure that. But it is in the city's best interest, staff feels, to continue on with Technion solely for the systems furniture.
Councillor?
Thank you. I was just not understanding why we would agree to a sole source and then negotiate thereafter once the business has secured a sole source. So I just thought it was backward.
Tina?
So just further to that, sorry, maybe I wasn't clear, Councillor. So through the chair, previously we did issue an RFP and Technion won that. So this is a continuation of the terms and conditions from that original contract. Okay. And it's simply because we have a lot of inventory in stock that we can reuse. And if we were to engage with another vendor, that inventory might easily become obsolete for us.
Okay. Can I ask a supplementary question, Chair? And it's probably not within the real domain of it, but why do we have a lot of inventory? Why are we keeping a lot of inventory, and what's?
So through the chair, pardon me, maybe my use of the words "a lot of inventory" is being misused. I believe that facilities does have the dollar values that we have in inventory at the moment, but I believe we asked Technion for a breakdown of the inventory that we had versus the amount of new material that we have bought for various configurations and moves throughout for the past 3 or 4 years. And I believe that the amount that we reused versus the amount of new parts and pieces that we bought were fairly equal. So I'm not sure if there's someone here from facilities that can talk to those dollar values.
Through the chair, it's Rome D'Angelo, Director of Energy, Fleet and Facilities. So we do have an inventory. We didn't add this to the report, but we could come back with a detailed report on how much we have in inventory and the value of the inventory. And the reason why we do have inventory over the years, we've done major renovations, and most recently was the downtown accommodation plan, which moved staff from Public Works and from the Standard Life Building, Human Resources and Public Works into Stelco Tower. So there was a configuration there, or major renovation there, leasehold improvements there, which we reduced the footprint from 210 square feet per employee to about 180, which left some excess inventory. So Situations like that allow us to have excess inventory, as well as doing a major renovation at 330 Wentworth. Left some remnants and some inventory. So we do have some stock and some significant inventory as a result of accommodation strategies, I guess you could say. And if council wishes, we could, or committee wishes, we could bring back an inventory of the furniture that we have in stock.
Thank you, Ron. Councillor Wilson?
Personally, I would be interested in that only because we've had even yesterday a conversation about being competitive. How are we going to attract workers, having to accommodate hybrid working because of the shrinkage of the participation labor force. So I'm just concerned if we, the size of the inventory and what we're going to do with it, and making sure we don't add to it unnecessarily. But if my colleagues share that interest, that would be great. I would be interested.
So through the chair, if I can add to that, our intent on this report was to go for a 10-year negotiations. And as a result of what's happened through the pandemic and the hybrid solutions and some of the changes that we're going to be experiencing over the next 5 years, we were cognizant of extending it to 10 years and just allowing us the 5 years based on the inventory that we do have, as well as some of the changes that are going to result of hybrid solutions and different office solutions that we're going to see in the next 5 years. So really, this 5 years creates a bit of a bridge for us, and we will be coming back to committee, most likely Public Works Committee, on various strategies. And there's a number of stakeholders that need to be engaged in that strategy. Would be human resources, facilities, IT, and others that will have some input in some of the changes to the office environment in the next 5 to 10 years.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. Through you, Chair, to Mr. D'Angelo. So you're coming back, is it in 2023 with a report you said to Public Works on the implications of new workplace practices and what that means for both accommodation and the inventory to accommodate that?
Through the chair, we can come in earlier or sooner than later with the inventory that we do have. But in terms of the strategy, the office strategy, that's going to take a bit of time, given the nature and the implications it may have from a human resources perspective and from an IT perspective. So we do have that in our work plan, and that may be a little bit further than 2023. It might be a report that comes back in 24 or possibly 2025 as we start to pull the stakeholders together and developing a bit of a working team to evaluate that.
I appreciate that it's on your radar, Chair Pearson, and I don't want to add unnecessarily to your workload. I would favor something sooner than 2025, that's for sure, but I'll leave that in your good hands. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And I see Jeanette wants to comment as well. Jeanette, if you're there. Janet Warner.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, Jeanette Smith, City Manager. Just to add to Rome's answer, we know that our future work models that we came through out of whatever phase of the pandemic we're in now, is that people are starting to work differently. Mm-hmm. And, you know, we're seeing where in some areas it's working really well, in other areas we're getting feedback from employees, maybe not as much. So you'll recall, as part of our overall looking at recruitment and retention, because we know we are in a very tight labor market, and everything I've reading is it's not going to be a short-term thing. No. We're doing that fulsome review that HR is leading with the senior leadership team, with input from our directors, looking looking at, our compensation and comparators, looking about how our future work. So it's quite comprehensive. And we know, based on that, we'll have better intel about how the hybrid is working. And we know coming out of that, that's going to have impacts on our policies, our parking policy, but also our facility strategy. You don't want to do it too soon, because things are still shifting their ways out, but there's a natural progression from that recruitment and retention analysis that's coming early in 2023 to the new council, and the things that will come out of that, and one is looking at our facility strategy.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. I'm just going to go back. Seeing no further comments, thank you, Jeanette. Then may I have a mover and a seconder to receive and approve the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Vanderbeek, second by Councillor Wilson. Electronic vote, please.
And that vote carries 6-0.
Thank you. Item 10.4 is the Township of Glambrok Nonprofit Housing Corporation Pre-Development Funding Request HSC 22049, FCS 22070, Ward 11. We have Al Fletcher and Brian McMullen in attendance. May I have a mover and a second to put this report on the floor? Moved by Councillor Power, second by Councillor Ferguson. And are there any, is there any comments or concerns, discussions on this item? Sorry. Councillor Powers, sorry. Go ahead, Councillor Powers.
Thank you. I'm just speaking on behalf of Councillor Brenda Johnson, who is in support of this. It's an initiative that will provide upwards of 100 seniors units in the Glanbrook area, and she is very supportive of it. And as outlined on page 221, it's not interest-free loan. It's a loan that's payable at the rate that we've determined, and will be provided in 3 installments as the project moves forward. She is supportive of the proposed here.
Hopefully everyone caught that, because you were breaking up, Councillor, but thank you. Councillor Wilson?
Sorry, thank you. I did catch most of that, but just so I'm supportive of it, I just wanted to make sure I understood it, though. With respect to the actual, the amount and what it's being earmarked for pre-development work, just looking for some feedback from the staff. So pre-development work, is that all the paperwork and getting things all in order, but that is not an assurance, or is it an assurance that this corporation has received the funds it needs from other orders of government, et cetera, to proceed in the actual development? If someone could just clarify that for me. Thank you.
Mr. Fletcher, Mr. McDonald?
Thank you. Through the chair to the councillor, Al Fletcher, Acting Director of Housing Services. The pre-development costs would be all those supporting studies that are required for a complete submission of a zoning application, archaeology, site design, engineering, and so on, and need to be all completed before the application can go in and the merit of the application determined.
If I could ask a supplementary question then, so sorry, Mr. Fletcher, if you could further help me out on that. Has this development received the funding it requires from other entities?
Through the chair to the councillor, no, they are in the process of making applications for the funding. The goal in getting this funding to them, the pre-development costs, is to move them closer to shovel ready, which makes them, they generally can get a more positive response on funding the closer you are to putting a shovel in the ground. So there's quite a bit of work that needs to be done to increase their possibility of funding.
So I don't want to be a negative Nelly. I am again supportive of the recommendation. However, what happens in the event that we were dealing with a file yesterday where we found out from City Housing Hamilton that the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation kind of changed the rules right near the end, which put two projects just about to begin development on unstable ground. So what happens to this corporation if their development is not approved for them to, how would they repay the 1.7 through the chair?
Sorry. Al?
So through the chair, Brian McMullen, Director of Financial Planning, Administration and Policy in the Corporate Services Department. Yeah, the terms and conditions on the term sheet that we've developed, and we'll be working with the organization. We'll have specific terms about repaying that and not making sure that we don't go down the road if they don't get other funding secured. I don't think we want to go down that road and have to not have them repay that money. So there'll be conditions in there about repaying the money for sure. Under any terms and conditions.
Thank you.
If I may add, it's Al Fletcher again. Just the terms and conditions are set out that it's not the full amount at the outset. There's milestones that have to be accomplished before they get their funding, so it helps safeguard the money is not completely lost, for example, but the milestones are a percentage based on signing of the agreement, percentage on the rezoning application being approved and the bylaw in effect, and then on submission of site plan.
That's really helpful, Mr. Fletcher. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so with that, then we had a mover and a second to put it on the floor. Recorded vote, please, and approval of the recommendation, right, Madam Clerk?
That is correct.
Thank you. Use the same mover and seconder. Thank you. Oops, where am I? There. Okay.
And that vote carries 6-0.
Thank you. We're going on to item 10.5 is the IT Asset Management Review Report 52693 AUD 22006 citywide. We have Charles Brown and Maria McChesney in attendance. May I have a mover and a seconder to put this item on the floor? And before we go there, I'm going to just note that appendices A and B to this report are confidential. If committee members wish to discuss appendices A and B, we will need to defer consideration of the report until after closed session. So is anyone wishing to go into closed session and have this deferred? Councillor Wilson? You wish to have it deferred? Okay, so so then, Madam Clerk, it just says here
Yeah, so we'll just, we'll need a mover and a seconder to defer consideration. We'll take an electronic vote on it, and then we'll come back to it during private and confidential.
Okay, so moved by Councillor Wilson, seconded by? Don't have a seconder.
I'll second it.
Councillor Clark will second it. Okay, all in favor?
I apologize, Councillor Powers, I didn't see your vote there. Thank you. And that vote carries 4-2.
Thank you, everyone. So we'll postpone this then and go on to the rest and then carry this one at the end. Correct, Madam Clerk?
That is correct.
Sure. Okay. So item 10.6 is the City Enrichment Fund Equity, Diversity and Inclusion EDI Recommendation Report, GRA 21003B, citywide. Morgan Stahl and Mimi John. Can I have a mover and a seconder to put this report on the floor? Moved by Councillor Ferguson, second by Councillor Vanderbeek. And are there any questions or comments with regards to this report? Councillor Ferguson.
Yes, I wonder if Morgan could just give us an overview of where we're trying to go with this. I had trouble understanding it when I read through the report, and it might be better if I hear Morgan explain what the issue is.
Okay. Morgan?
Through the chair to Councillor Ferguson, members of the Subgrants Committee may recall that there's been a series of reports around embedding an EDI lens and capturing EDI data in the City Enrichment Fund processes. So I wouldn't categorize it as an issue, rather an opportunity. We have not been capturing EDI data on behalf of applicants in a consistent way across program areas. So the recommendations outlined in the report give staff the ability to capture that information in a more comprehensive way. You'll see in the appendices that we are recommending including 2 questions that capture that equity, diversity, and inclusion information about our applicants, the populations they serve, and the leadership of their teams. The way that we've been reliant on an EDI lens up until this point has been if applicants identify in their program description the populations that they serve or the demographics that they serve, and it's kind of been up to each individual program manager to sift through those applications and kind of capture that information if it's been kind of self-identified. So the recommendations outlined in the report, again, give us the ability to capture that in a more comprehensive and consistent way.
Okay.
I also just want...
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, my question to you is, so is it, if I'm looking at Appendix A right now, and it looks like there's boxes to be ticked depending on how you identify yourself. If there's a committee, a volunteer committee, that's made application to the City Enrichment Fund and they can't tick all these boxes, will their grant application then move to denial?
Through the chair to the councillor, no, their grant application would not move towards denial. We haven't yet determined how this data will play a role in the weight of applications. We're simply recommending that we begin to capture the data first in order to make a decision about how an EDI lens could be implemented in the overall City Enrichment Fund program.
Okay, so what you do is you plan to capture this, watch trends, and then eventually make it be a weighted part of the calculation for anybody who's eligible for enrichment funds. Is that where the end game is?
Through the chair to the councillor, yes, that's correct. And I also just wanted to acknowledge that both Mimi John, the grants coordinator, as well as our program managers are on the line virtually, and they're happy to answer any supplementary questions as well.
Okay, my concern for that is we have a lot of volunteers that serve on various boards and agencies and sports teams, and there's a long list of them. And as you know, we have a long list of people who are eligible for or who apply for enrichment funds. And typically, in my experience, a lot of times they have trouble getting enough volunteers to be able to fill all their positions. So if they don't get enough volunteers that meet the self-identification criteria, they're going to lose their funding, and subsequently, eventually, they could lose their funding eventually, which means they become extinct. I'm just a little concerned about going in that direction. Before I became an elected person, I used to sit on a lot of these volunteer committees, and you used to always scramble to try to find enough people because generally, those type of volunteer boards, it's a working volunteer. It's not a governance volunteer. Are you concerned about that?
Through the chair to the councillor, that's not something that I'm concerned about at this point. I think we're trying to ensure that both we capture that information, and it could be very well that we're funding organizations that are equity deserving. But until we have that type of data collection mechanism in place, we don't have the ability to determine what kind of weight that will be placed upon application. So I think in some ways it's perhaps an unfair suggestion to say that others would be disqualified if they're not serving equity-seeking populations, because until we have that data collection mechanism in place, we actually, we could be doing a really great job. We just don't know until we have that comprehensive and consistent approach through from the intake period all the way until fund rollout. I do see Mimi on the screen, so Mimi John, Grants Coordinator, may have some information to add.
Morning, Mimi.
Good morning. Thank you, through you, the chair. Again, Mimi John, coordinator of the City Enrichment Fund Grants Program. I just want to follow up and ensure all the community groups which are listening in, who are listening into this, EDI is very important across the city, and especially with council. This report came back because when we look at EDI, what Morgan said, we don't have the data captured. So the end goal, we don't specifically know what the end goal is, but what we're trying to do is basically gather the information to look at it to see where we are at right now. And the recommendations that are in the report are moving towards more consistency within the fund, and also to ensure there's accessibility, inclusivity, which we know we have in the fund, but we are trying to make it consistent across the board. But we don't know what we have specifically right now. I have a lot of questions as the grant coordinator, specifically in terms of data. How many groups are serving this population, or how many are our rural population? And we serve all our different communities, but readily right now in the fund, we don't have that data to absolutely say, oh yes, we have 5 programs which are specifically for our groups. And so I just wanted to add that on, that we are just moving the needle in terms of getting the appropriate information to inform future decisions. But there's no end goal in terms of we don't want to provide funding. We do. We're trying to look at how can we provide funding in a more comprehensive, equitable way.
Okay, thanks, man. It's an admirable goal to obtain the data, so at least you know what we're dealing with. I've seen chairmen scrambling around trying to find volunteers to fill vacant spots. And if they want to do the job and they got the energy, because some of these volunteer groups do a lot of work. I know Heritage Days is always a challenge to get people to volunteer because it's a lot of work. And we don't want to disqualify them from getting their funding because they may not meet an arbitrary target on this. But it's good to collect it just so we know. But I just want to cast a little doubt that I want to make sure we don't cause some of these volunteer groups to have to fold because they can't hit these targets when you get there. I appreciate it. Maybe you're saying you're not setting targets right now, but you may in the future. So that's my point. Thank you.
If I may add just one more comment through the chair to the councillor. We know that, if there are groups that require more volunteers, through our team, we do have very strong relationships with community, particularly with equity-seeking groups. So if there are organizations that are looking for volunteers and they want to ensure that members from equity-deserving communities fill those vacant roles on their volunteer boards or on their committees, because we know that representation matters, and that representation can change the demographic of programming and the way that projects are rolled out. So I just want to emphasize that our team can be a resource for those folks, and we want to ensure that, again, as Mimi stated, there's equitable processes across the City Enrichment Fund application intake period, but also in the distribution of funds.
Okay, Councillor? Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm looking at recommendation C, and I'm trying to understand how I'm to interpret that based on the conversation that I just heard between staff and Councillor Ferguson. So it indicates that staff are being directed to incorporate a consistent adjudication process across all program streams and maintain category ratings to ensure equality, equity, inclusivity, and transparency in the fund. So that kind of sounds like you're starting that process now in terms of adjudicating grant applications through the EDI lens.
Through the chair to the member of council, right now the adjudication process is different amongst program streams. Sorry, there's a fly buzzing around me, so if you see me swatting a fly, that is
Why
not...
shoot it over there? Because it was driving me crazy.
I'm sorry. Adjudication is not consistent across the program areas. So, for example, we use external adjudicators in some areas, but not all. We use external facilitators in one area, but not all. This recommendation gives us the ability to assess the adjudication process, determine what's working well, and then ensure that there's a consistent approach to adjudication. In some areas, it's all internal staff that adjudicate those applications. So we're looking to ensure that before the next intake period, we're applying a consistent adjudication approach. So it's not necessarily the scoring will change from an adjudication perspective, but just that if we're going to move forward with a consistent approach, it's either an equal makeup of internal and external staff, or it's completely external or completely internal, but that it's at least consistent across program streams.
And the last question, and that was actually very helpful in terms of understanding what was intended with paragraph C. Will council see a report annually outlining the EDI ratings, if you will, that you found with different applications through this funding process? Will that become a public document in the future?
Through the chair to the member of council, it is our intent that we would continue to report back on a consistent basis to the grants subcommittee with any potential changes to weight and additional EDI metrics. I would argue we've been reporting more consistently than annually, but I think at the very minimum that would be on an annual basis to the grants subcommittee.
No, the transparency of the City Enrichment Fund Committee has been excellent through this process, and I just wanted to make sure that this EDI process becomes a public process so that people can see the adjudications. And I'm hearing that's going to be the case.
Through the chair to the member of council, correct.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Powers.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I disconnected and reconnected. My question is, in my past experience on grants and when the community enrichment funds came through and the reports found their way to the grants committee, is that part of the reporting, including a scoring of those applications. The question I have here is, will this element, the EDI component, be scored specifically, and will it form the determinations and the recommendations to the grant committee?
Through the chair to Councillor Powers, Councillor Ferguson had similar questions earlier, and perhaps that was when you may have reconnected. But I'll just reiterate my comments so that you have heard them as well. Right now, we're just looking to capture the EDI data. We haven't yet determined how that will play a role in the actual scoring and weighting of applications. In Appendix A, you can see that there are two potential questions we're looking to include in the next CEF intake period, which occurs from September 1st to November 1st. If the recommendations are approved, then that will give us the ability to capture that data in a more consistent and comprehensive way. We have not yet determined how that will play a role in the weight and scoring of applications, but based on previous comments, that would come back to the grants subcommittee for approval before any change to adjudication processes and scoring.
So thank you very much for repeating that again. Yes, indeed, I was having connection problems and finally figured it out. So thank you very much for repeating it.
Thank you, everyone. So with that, I have no further speakers. It was moved and seconded to and for approval of the recommendation on item 10.6. All in favor?
So through the chair, Councillor Ferguson, did you intend to vote against?
Yes.
Then I'll need a different mover on the recommendations.
Okay, moved by Councillor Powers, second by Councillor Vanderbeek. Is that okay? Or
Yes, my
seconded?
apologies.
Yeah,
I'll
that's
open it
fine.
now. You have to revote. My apologies. And welcome, Councillor Jackson. I see you've been waiting patiently. I know the items coming up that you wanted to be sure is addressed today. So
Thank
I'm
you,
just
sir.
waiting on Councillor Wilson. Oh, thank
So
you,
Wilson's
Councillor.
a thumbs up. Thank you.
And that vote carries 5-1.
Thank you. On to item 10.7 is the City Enrichment Fund Digital Program, CM 22015, GRA 22003, citywide. We have Cyrus Durrani and Morgan Stahl. Can I have a move and a second to put this report on the floor? Moved by Councillor Vanderbeek, second by Councillor Wilson. On the floor, are there any questions or concerns?
Councillor Ferguson.
Councillor Ferguson?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. My only concern, maybe Cyrus can explain this to me, why you're taking it from the City Enrichment Fund. It looks like it's to get better connectivity for the public, but we always scramble every year. I know Theatre Aquarius is upset that they were shot there short $5,000 this year because we were limited in the amount of the Enrichment Fund. But now you're taking it looks like pretty much the entire reserve in the City Enrichment Fund for this one project, which is new. And why did this not go through the Grants Committee first before it comes here?
Through you, Madam Chair, to Councillor Ferguson. So happy to answer those questions. Thank you for those questions. So first, there wasn't quorum for grant subcommittee on Monday. So through recommendations of clerks, my understanding is that these approval items were brought forward to AFNA to accommodate getting direction on those from council. That's why they didn't previously go to grant subcommittee ahead of coming to AFNA. Secondly, with regard to your question, the total recommendation in this report of $150,000 over 2 years represents a small portion of the smaller portion of the reserve that's available from grant subcommittee. And there's also, based on this recommendation, no impact to any of the other funding streams in terms of any reductions or changes to those available funding streams. And I would say, I guess it's at the discretion of grant subcommittee as well as to where there are other requirements for the fund. But I will reiterate that this ask of $75,000 a year or $150 as a one-time pilot does represent a fairly smaller portion of the existing reserve.
Because, Madam Chair, there was a lot of people that had to return their grants or not use it because of COVID. And we're still trying to catch up on that. And I just have trouble approving this before it runs by the Grants Committee. I know Councillor Johnson has her finger on this very good as the chair. And it was too bad that the parks booked this the same day as the GIC, which typically run all day and into the evening. And so it was destined to fail. It'd be nice if we could refer this back to the next grants committee meeting, because it looks like the meeting load, to put it in this week, the 1 week in August when we meet, when we're stacked up heavy, is unfortunate. So my preference would be to refer this back to grants committee for further consideration, then have it come forward day after that. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a recommendation to defer, Madam Chair, or to refer it back. Let's see, okay, I don't have any speakers. Do I have a seconder?
I'd be happy to move a referral back to grants committee or future meeting to give consideration to this, because they see the big picture and the whole thing.
If I may.
Seconded by Councillor Powers. Madam Clerk, you were saying something?
To the chair, no, it wasn't me. I believe someone else wished to speak to it.
If I may, sorry to interrupt, Morgan Stahl, Director of Government Relations and Community Engagement. If the item were to be deferred, unfortunately, it wouldn't make the intake period for the City Enrichment Fund, and I believe we would also be in a lame duck period, so I don't know that we would be able to approve the funding amounts. So I just want to caution and flag that as a potential challenge. It would then perhaps require going to the grants subcommittee with a new council, but it would unfortunately delay our process and not allow us to bring it forward before the next City Enrichment Fund intake. And I would also just like to acknowledge the fact that this report also, I think, further supports the city's EDI initiatives. And so that's something to perhaps take into consideration when we're thinking about our wider strategy.
And Cyrus Serrani, Chief Digital Officer here, I'd also like to add that we did consult with Councillor Johnson before this report was even considered, and she provided us some feedback and direction as how to pursue this. So we have, it's regrettable that she's not here to be able to comment on it today, but we did work in close consultation with her and her recommendations prior to even developing this report. To bring it forward to originally planned grant subcommittee on Monday. Thank you.
Councillor, I'm still in your hands. Wait a second. Is it Councillor Clark? Did you wish to speak to this? Sorry.
Yes, please, at the appropriate time. Is that now?
Well, I'm
also cede the floor to Councillor Clark for now.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Clark.
Thank you. So I'm struggling trying to see where the report back comes. It's a pilot. There's no sunset review or sunset clause. So at the end of 24 months, it expires. Is there a report back that comes back to the grant committee and to AF&A as to whether or not this program was a success?
Through you, Madam Chair, to Councillor Clark. Yes, that was the intent. It was meant to be a pilot so that we could see the uptake and success and create feedback from both recipients and the types of applications that were received to test the waters as it relates to this type of digital equity funding stream within CEF. And though not stated in the recommendations, the intent would be to bring back a findings report to grant subcommittee for their information and at some point determine maybe it's not successful, maybe it is, but that information garnered as within the 2-year pilot period to inform future and information back to grant subcommittee about its success.
So in the digital realm, would you be looking at applications from not-for-profit saying they want to set up an interactive web page to serve their community?
The funding stream, as outlined in Appendix A to you, Councillor, is covering a variety of areas. So it could be digital literacy programming, it could be enabling connectivity for marginalized populations, it could be digital literacy training, it could be equipment purchase to support non-for-profits and their ability to deliver digital equity-related programming. So there's a variety of benefits that would help further sort of our digitally divided or disconnected and communities through the programming for not-for-profits to apply to this new stream, and it is modeled after other digital equity grant programs that exist that have been carried out in the past.
Thank you for that. And to follow up on Councillor Ferguson's queries, why is it that it can't be referred to the committee?
Through you, Madam Chair, to Councillor Clark, the concern was that Grant Subcommittee is not meeting again prior to the September launch of the intake process, so we would not have authority to include this stream in the September launch and intake for grants, the Community Enrichment Fund. And our understanding is that if that was to happen afterwards, it would not be able to be implemented until the 2023 Enrichment Fund intake, because we wouldn't have the authority to implement this stream prior to the general public launch of intake for Community Enrichment Fund.
This puts us in a bit of a box because we're making a decision without the input of the committee that's supposed to advise us on these matters. So when does the funding applications go out in the new year?
They typically go out in the new year following the grant subcommittee meeting that happens in early May on an annual basis. But the challenge is, sorry, through the chair to the member of council, that the intake period, so applications open September 1st and they close November 1st. So applicants wouldn't know that there is a stream available if we were to defer this. I think the other challenge is if we were in a lame duck, and if I understand correctly, we wouldn't have the authority to use those or leverage those reserve funds for the digital equity stream.
Is it possible to have a report back in 12 months on this? Seeing that is not going through the normal process through the committee, and we don't have their input. If you're going to be launching a pilot, can you not provide a report back on what transpired with the digital program in 12 months, as opposed to waiting 2 years?
Through you, Madam Chair, to Councillor Clark, yes, that would be completely possible. And I would also go one step further and say that we could provide information to Grant Subcommittee about the number of applicants that have applied to the year one pilot. So it could be a mini report showing sort of the intake and uptake even before the 12-month period, with a subsequent 12-month update to Grant Subcommittee about the initial first year pilot success, and a subsequent 2-year update to make it a mini, a 12-month, and a 24-month. I think there would be no concerns with that, and actually very prudent.
So I would suggest, Madam Chair, perhaps an amendment to the recommendation to add a D that would have a report back annually during the pilot to the AFNA and to the grant committee. If there's a seconder for that.
Do I have a seconder to that then? Councillor Vanderbeek? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. And I think that that exhausts speakers. Now I'm just wanting to get, follow process. I just want to be sure, because Councillor Ferguson had the referral, but he deferred to Councillor Clark. So Councillor Ferguson, are you okay with the direction now?
Well, I agree with Councillor Clark. I feel like I'm painted in a box here. And I don't know why we couldn't call it another meeting in September. I mean, our meeting slate, although a number of you are campaigning, but the December time slots are wide open. It's just so unfortunate it was scheduled after a long agenda on a GIC day, because it was just destined to fail for that reason. So is there any reason why we can't have a grants committee meeting in September, early September? The chair could call a meeting? And Madam Chairman, the other thing about it, it seems like it's becoming too easy to go and get some money out of the grants reserve. I mean, we had to recall recently, they had a special council resolution to take $500,000 out of the reserve to help those groups in the community that are having trouble with the COVID-19 impacts. And that got approved. I don't know whether they got the matching funds somewhere else in the city or not, because that was the condition of it. Now we're going to go take another 300,000 out of here, and you know, Councillor Vanderbeek was at the meeting with the Theatre Aquarius where they got quite animated that they were cut back $5,000 this year. And, you know, Theatre Aquarius is a very important part of our community and provide a great service to us. So can somebody answer the question for me, why we can't schedule a grants meeting on a slow day in early September?
So to the chair, it's Angela from the Clerk's Department. I believe Jeanette Smith would like to speak to this.
Thank you, through the chair to council. I think scheduling the meeting, Councillor Ferguson, isn't the problem. Is if the grants committee makes a decision that they want to implement this pilot, the money is above the threshold of the restricted acts for lame duck. And so even if they did, council couldn't ratify that because it's anything over $50,000 that wasn't budgeted for in the 2022 budget. And I always ask clerks to correct me if I'm wrong. And so, you know, definitely we don't want to feel like we're boxing you into a corner to do this. If you want to wait and it become something that's considered for the next cycle, then that's certainly your prerogative.
So City Manager Smith, then we could send it back to the committee and they could approve and come to council with spending $50,000, which is 2/3 of what the ask is for this year, and then top it up for the next year. Is that true?
Yes, so if clerks will correct me if I'm wrong, if it was under the $50,000 threshold, then you are not into one of the restricted acts.
Okay, so Madam Chair, based on that, I would still prefer to refer to a special grants committee meeting. It won't be long. We could do it virtually, and then we could see the big picture within the whole grants group, because I've sat on that now for 8 years. And, you know, it's very difficult. As I said, Councillor Vanderbeek and I got ambushed at the Theatre Aquarius board on this because they got caught back. And I just got to make sure that we're not making it too easy to go and spend all of the reserve when we have all these other groups out there that are looking for more and will run out of money. And so I would still like to let my resolution stand that refer back to grants, and they could approve up to $50,000 for the first year, and then could go to, you know, they're looking for 150,000. They could go to 100,000 in the second year. So I'm going to let my referral, my seconder will agree, stand.
Okay, so.
Sorry to interrupt, Madam Chair. Jeanette Smith would like to speak to it again.
Thank you. Through the chair, as usual, General Manager Zagaric in his problem-solving brain has come up with another potential option, and that would be that you could approve the funds today, because you're not in lame duck, subject to the endorsement of the grants committee in September. And then you could have a grants committee meeting in September. And if they support it, then it's already been approved. And if they don't support it, it would die for this cycle.
That's a brilliant suggestion. So
it's not mine. I have to give full credit to GM Zagaric.
Well, as we know, Mike's always brilliant. And so I'd be prepared to support that and the amendment that Councillor, so it'd be two amendments. One that we approve it subject to the Grants Committee agreeing. Secondly, that the, I think Councillor Clark's amendment was something in the order of that the staff report back annually on this. Have I got that to Councillor Clark? Have I got that right?
That's correct, sir. Thank you.
So I'm prepared to change my amendment if my seconder would agree, Councillor Powers, to follow that format. And you see he's got a thumbs up.
So Madam Clerk, do you have that as additional items? Sorry, I'm not on the
So
toggle
through the chair, yes, I'll write that out, but also Councillor Vanderbeek would like to speak to the amendment, maybe?
Mr. Vanderbeek?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my concern with that scenario is that the grants open on September 1st. And so if that grants committee meeting is not prior to the beginning of the grants application period opening, it's still too late for this year, I think. So I'd like to ask that question of staff to understand that, because if that's the case, we almost might as well push it off to 2023 and deal with it through the regular process of the grants committee. So I would like to have that question answered if possible.
Through the chair, Jeanette Smith, City Manager. We were just consulting on that on the stairwell, and you're quite correct. So instead of having a grant subcommittee in early September, as long as the members were available to meet in August, again, we do the same, I'd recommend the same process, that this committee supports it, approves the funding, subject to the grants committee approval. And if they could meet in August, then you should be fine.
Thank you. Madam Chair, just a subsequent question to that. And that is, when would council ratify that?
September.
Would be in September. Would it not?
Yeah.
So through the chair, following Friday's council meeting, this Friday, tomorrow, the 9th, my apologies, the 12th, the next council meeting will not be until September 14th.
And so, Madam Chair, we will be in lame duck after next Friday. And so I mean, it's sounding to me like it's today or it's not till next year. That's how I'm sort of seeing it here. So I'm just putting that out there for consideration of the mover and the seconder. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Ferguson.
Sorry, Councillor Ferguson, you're muted again.
So if this committee approves this $75,000, it's ratified by council on Friday, subject to the grants committee approving it, does it have to go to council if we've already approved it at council?
Yes.
Through the chair, yes, it would still need to be, but regardless of when you hold the meeting after this meeting, it won't be ratified until council on September 14th.
Okay, Madam Chair, I'm going to go back to what my originally proposed then, is that we refer it to the grants committee to come back to us with a contribution of $50,000 for this year, and then to be $100,000 for the following year, which the new council can deal with. I wish there was an easy way. If the council's already approving it, subject to grants committee saying it's okay, I'm not sure why it has to go to council again since they've already approved it, but I'll leave it with you.
Yeah. Okay, so now I think we've got three things on the roll. So Councillor Clark's amendment, you have, Madam Clerk, and that's straightforward. So that's not an issue.
Yes.
And then you're adding,
just to add a subsection D, that staff be directed to report back to the grant subcommittee annually respecting the City Enrichment Fund Digital Program pilot program.
correct? And then Councillor Ferguson's.
And it's a referral back to the grants subcommittee.
Okay, so I think we'll have to vote on the amendment first so that it gets on the report, correct? And then once that's voted on, then we'll have to vote on the referral. So we won't be approving the report, but we want to make sure that amendment gets on the report, correct?
Through the chair, yes. So that
Okay.
was moved by Councillor Clark and seconded by Councillor Vanderbeek, I believe.
Yeah. Okay, so does everyone understand that? That's Councillor Clark's amendment that they report back annually. With that, it's been moved in second. Recorded vote, please. Councillor Powers is a thumbs up.
And that vote carries 6-0.
Thank you. And then we have the referral. Councillor Vanderbeek, did you wish to speak again? Okay, thank you. Then we have the referral. It's moved by Councillor Ferguson, seconded by Councillor Powers, that we refer this back to the Enrichment for the Grants Committee, Enrichment Committee. Right, Councillor Ferguson? Yeah, Madam Clerk, you have that?
Yes, but just to be clear, you're referring it back to the grant subcommittee for a meeting in August, but we all know that it won't be ratified until mid-September, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I will open the vote.
Thank you.
And that vote carries 5-1.
Thank you, everyone. We're going to move on now to, there's no motions. We have a notice of motion. It's the 12/1/2022. And again, I'm going to welcome Councillor Tom Jackson, who initiated the process on this today on this particular motion. It's the 2022 Hamilton Santa Claus Parade. Councillor Vanderbeek, I believe you have a notice of motion that you'd like to waive the rules. And I believe Councillor Powers will be seconding it. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So this is a notice of motion to provide ongoing financial and in-kind support from the City of Hamilton to the 2022 Hamilton Santa Claus Parade. I am waiving the rules so that this can be dealt with prior to the end of the week when we go on, the council ends up in lame duck. I do already have, I see Councillor Ferguson wanting to second it, but I do already have a seconder, Councillor Ferguson, in Councillor Powers. And this is to waive the rules so we can deal with the motion.
Thank you. All in favor of waiving the rules? And thumbs up for Councillor Powers.
Excellent, thank you. That vote carries 6-0.
Thank you. Councillor Vanderbeek on the motion now.
Thank you very much. This was a notice of motion. So we will be doing this as a motion now. And I would like to cede the floor to Councillor Tom Jackson because I am moving this motion on his behalf and he may have a few words that he would like to share about this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Jackson.
Well, thank you, Chair Pearson, and thank you, Councillor Vanderbeek. Did you want me to say my few words now before moving the motion? Was that what you preferred, Councillor Vanderbeek?
Well, I was thinking you might want to give a bit of a update on it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Vanderbeek. Chair Pearson, members of AFNA that I hardly ever attend. I'm really happy with where we've landed with this motion. I want to right away thank Directors Brooks Joyner and Stahl, and I want to thank Coordinator Mimi John and Policy Analyst Andrea Carvello and Business Administrator Monique Garwood. We had a wonderful meeting several weeks ago with several of the volunteers from the Hamilton Santa Claus Parade, led by Chair Doug Hobson. They don't have any paid staff, no executive director, purely volunteer driven. And like so many during the COVID period, they did their best last year to have these little site-specific little pop-ups of in some parks across the city of a little bit of joy that they were trying to bring to families in the neighborhood parks with Santa Claus. and some treats and toys and things like that. But obviously, the last 2 years, they could not host the normal parade in November like they've traditionally done for something like 50 plus years in Hamilton. And so the hardship was that financially, they still had the expenses, Chair Pearson, of maintaining all their floats and equipment during 2021, but they only received about 1/3 of the normal revenue and sponsorships and donations they would get because they didn't have a full parade. So hence this motion before you, the three-part. The key part is that, and this is all with staff support, which I'm very grateful for, that the normal 30% guideline be waived this one time for the parade in 2022. And then B follows, which the parade organizers do have enough funds left over. They can pay that amount back, but no more than that. And then the third part is that the $46,000 plus that grants had approved, subject to this repayment being arranged and approved, can then be released, and hopefully then we can have a full parade. And so, Chair Pearson, to conclude, like that movie Miracle on 34th Street, they proved there was a Santa Claus. And I just know, and in my heart of hearts, want to believe you and your committee truly believe that you do want a full Santa Claus parade this November. You must support this motion, though, in order to have that. Thank you for allowing me my words, and I'm a strong supporter. Thanks, Chair Pearson.
So very passionate, Councillor Jackson. Loved hearing from you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Councillor Vanderbeek, the motion, please. I'll put the motion on the floor first, Councillor.
Sure, it's moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Powers. And Councillor Jackson very eloquently set out the therefore be it resolved. So, and it is in front of you. And so I will just move it. Councillor Powers will second it and we can vote or take questions.
Councillor Ferguson, did you have a question?
No, just a comment. I just want to thank Councillor Jackson for bringing this forward. I have a 2-year-old and a 7-year-old grandchild come Christmas time, and they do believe in Santa Claus. And I think it's important we keep that hope available to young children and offer them the opportunity to come out and watch Santa Claus come to town. So thanks for bringing it forward, Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, sir. So with that, recorded vote, please. It's been moved and seconded. Councillor Powers is a thumbs up. Thank you. Santa will.
6-0.
Santa will continue. Thank you, everyone. Now we're going to go on
Thank
to.
you so much, Chair Pearson Committee. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. So we're on to item 13 is the general issue information, other business. It's the amendments to the outstanding business list. We have a mover and a seconder to recognize the amendments. Moved by Councillor Vanderbeek, second by Councillor Ferguson. All in favor?
And that vote carries 6-0.
Thank you, everyone. It now brings us to the item 14, which is the private and confidential that we said we would pass over to the end of the meeting. It is item 10.5, AUD 22006. We need, oops, sorry. It was deferred. So we will now go into closed session for item 14.1, appendices A and B to item 10.5. May I have a mover and a seconder on the following? Okay, I'm reading all this out, Madam Clerk, that Brad Brookman and Aaron Fuhrer from Felicia IIP Advisors Limited be permitted to attend the closed session portion of the meeting with respect to confidential appendices A and B to report AUD 22006, ITS Asset Management Review Report 52693. I need a mover and a seconder, please. I'm going to suggest moved by Councillor Wilson, seconded by?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. All in favor?
And I apologize. We see that Councillor Powers has his hand up. I'm not sure if he has a question on this or.
Councillor Powers? No, sorry. There we go. Okay. Thank you.
And that carries 6-0.
Okay, now I have, please have a mover and a second to move into closed session and this will be pursuant to Section 9(1), subsection A of the city's procedural bylaw 21-021 as amended, and Section 239(2), subsection A of the Ontario Municipal Act 2001 as amended, as the subject matters pertain to the security of the property of the municipality or local board. Mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Wilson, second by Councillor Clark, if that's okay. And recorded vote, please. Councillor Powers is a thumbs up. Members of the public are advised.
And that carries 6-0.
Yeah, thank you. Members of the public are advised that during the closed session portion of the meeting, the live stream will broadcast a closed session in progress screen. The broadcast will resume when the closed session portion of the meeting is complete. Before we move into closed session, I would ask all members of the public to please now exit the WebEx meeting, and thank you, as well as any staff that are not directly related to the in-camera items are also asked to exit this WebEx meeting. Thank you. And council members, please ensure that you are in a private room. There's a comment in the chat by the clerk. I'm not sure if anybody is thinking of an amendment.
We are, just committee members, we are now live as well.
Thank you. Thank you. So we're back in open session, everyone. We're back on item 10.5, which is the IT Asset Management Review Report 52693 AUD 22006 citywide. May I have a mover and a seconder to approve the item 10.5? Moved by Councillor Ferguson, seconded by Councillor Powers. All in favor?
So just, Madam Chair, just before we go forward with it, were you wanting to, was there going to be an amendment to the report back timeline, or are we approving it as is with August 2023?
That's what I asked my colleagues just before we, you said we were in open session, if they saw what you had in the chat. So is there any direction of changing the recommendation timeline, or do we stand by the recommendation?
I mean, it's just a preference of mine, Madam Chair, in that, but I'll live by the 1 year. But if they're able to come back sooner when the report's done, then that would be even more appropriate.
So the recommendation stands as is in the report. All in favor? Thumbs up for Councillor Powers, and I trust staff have received that, has heard that information and will do their best to bring things forward to us in a timely manner.
And that vote carries 6-0.
Thank you, everyone. Now we're going to move on to a motion to adjourn, please. Moved by Councillor Ferguson, seconded by Councillor Powers. Recorded vote, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Excellent roadmap today. Very streamlined, and thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the day. Rest up for tomorrow.
Thanks, everyone. That carries 6-0.